We're going to shift our focus now to our second component of population geography, which is migration. So we've studied first how natural births and deaths affect a population. Now we're taking a look at how migration is going to be affecting groups of people and areas. So just to start us off with a common definition, migration is a change in residence that is intended to be permanent. So this, of course, would differentiate migration from just simple movement. So migration is with the intention of permanent. Whether or not that actually remains permanent is something to be discussed and analyzed. We're going to be focusing for this essential question on what are the different types of migration. So there's lots of different types of migration and terminology associated with that. That'll give us just some common language to work with in class. Firstly, there's forced migration and there's voluntary migration. Voluntary, of course, is when people are just simply choosing to move to a new place for a whole variety of reasons that we'll talk about. A forced migration is when people are obviously forced to leave their country or place of residence. The people that are then forced are, there you have the term refugee, or they are referred to as refugees. Those are the people who are being forced to move specifically due to some type of persecution, some sort of oppression that they're facing in their native area. That term refugee, it comes with a lot of connotations. A lot comes with the concept of refugee. Refugee by law, by international law, is designated to certain rights. So oftentimes the places will refuse to call people refugees because they don't necessarily want to provide them with the asylum or the safety that would be corresponding to that. So that's something we'll talk about, because the idea of what makes a refugee and what is a migrant is really a hot topic in both modern day and for our course coming up. This we'll return to in class, but we were talking about for voluntary migrations, the different factors that influence people to migrate are referred to as push and pull factors, things that force people to or encourage someone to leave versus the factors that pull someone or attract someone to a new place. Those contribute to someone's decision to migrate voluntarily. An international migration is also known as an external migration. So that's when someone migrates outside of their country's borders. Here are some of the most common trends in migration. This is through 2002, so certainly out of date, but continues to be prevalent. These general trends continue to be prevalent, as you see on this map. So these are international or an external migration. Logically, then, an internal migration or migrations within a country's borders. And you can see this again is out of date. This is 2000, but the general population trends that you would see here of people moving south and moving west are accurate, and the areas of the Midwest losing population from these internal migrations too is accurate. So external, international, internal within a given country. Inter, the I-N-T-E-R, inter means between, so an interregional migration is just when people migrate between different regions. Of course, that term region is very nebulous, very abstract, that what exactly is a region could be a very small region or a very large region. But generally speaking, if someone's moving between the regions of between regions, that'd be interregional, whereas intra-regional, here we go. Intra-regional would be migrating within a region, and there's a typo there as well. So you can see, for example, an intra, which means within, is going to be something like someone moving from D.C. to Northern Virginia, or Northern Virginia to Southern Maryland, or Western Maryland. These are just the migration sort of in a general city area. Would be an example of an intra-regional migration. You can see that I have a chart down there in San Francisco. The core would be the city proper, and the suburbs are the area surrounding a city. So you can see people moving with intra-regional migration there. We'll return to this when we come to our urbanization unit, because we're going to talk about the fact, and this is where I have that graphic on the right, the common trend of people of urbanizing, moving to an urban area, versus moving outside of an urban area from the city center out to the suburbs or further out would be counter-urbanization. This is just another example of interregional migration. This just shows in the United States net in and net out migration from different states. Already mentioned this for the forced migration. The human migration flows in which movers have no choice but to relocate. I just want to show you an example of one of those forced migrations. The most common and most well-known historical example, of course, would be the transatlantic slave trade. Of the up to 12 million, estimates can go as high as 20 million enslaved Africans that were taken from Africa, from both Central and Western Africa, and forcibly migrated to the Americas, to North America, to Central America, and to South America. Those refugees, those people who've been forced from their homes and cannot return for fear of persecution, they're seeking asylum. This too is out of date. This is 2011 because there's several areas on here that are not mentioned clearly. Big one being Syria as an area where there's a large number of refugees leaving. These are areas of the world that there are large numbers of refugees that are people that are fleeing. So that says major refugee source countries. Something that we'll come back to later on. I want to actually show that this is just to add to your information about your voluntary migration. I don't need to recopy that definition piece, but we can just add to this. The migrants weigh, push, and pull factors of emigration. Emigration with an E means to exit. Immigration with an I means to come in. So emigration is an E, exit. I means immigration is to come in. They weigh their emigration from their home country first and where to go second. So that's the idea that they're deciding where to go based upon those just different push and pull factors. Distance decay, this is that concept we've learned, the farther you go, the less something impacts you. This is going to weigh into the decision of where people migrate because many migrants move a lot less far than they had originally thought. It's because the contact from the original source matters. So most migrants will stay in an area that's still relatively close to, that's a very broad term, but the most common trend is to have closer migrations rather than very large scale far migrations. Two other types of migrations, step migration and chain migration. Step migration is a migration that's undertaken in small and less extreme steps. So someone first moves to one place and then maybe to a farther place and then a farther place from there. Usually, step migration occurs if someone intends to go a very far distance. They will not do so because they will not do so. In the step migration, they will move to the first place and then they will have some sort of intervening opportunity. So one of those steps along the path, some sort of opportunity emerges that encourages that migrant to settle there instead. So let's say if somebody's moving from Mexico and they intend to go to Maine. Well, perhaps if that person in their migration path get an excellent job opportunity in Texas, then perhaps that would be that intervening opportunity. That means that would encourage that person to settle there in Texas as opposed to getting all the way to Maine. Chain migration, I want you to think of the links of a chain for this one. And here, this is an example here of step migration. You could, as I mentioned here, let's say if that person's migrating from Mexico, the example I just gave. They intended to get to Chicago, but they actually ended up staying in Texas. See, there we go. Chain migration would be when a migrant communicates with family and friends at home, encouraging further migration. So consider this idea that they go to one place and they create those links. So they're building a chain of migrants. One person from one area goes, and then their family follows, and then their family and friends follow. So that is called chain migration, which builds a link of an increased group of one particular community. This often leads and manifests itself in what are called ethnic enclaves. So in a city, for example, there might be one neighborhood or area called an ethnic enclave that's a product of chain migration. Someone came from a particular town or a particular region, encouraged other people from that place to come, and just like the links of a chain link fence, or just like any kind of chain that builds those links and that continues to create a little group within a community based upon that migration path. Okay, I would like you to, for your analysis questions, there are 5, but I'd like you to actually characterize these migrations using as many type of these terms as you can. Is this an internal, an external, forced, interregional, intra-regional, so on and so forth. So those are your analysis questions. Just tell me what kind of migration it is and why.